these are among the tough sanctions being considered to pressure Putin to come to the negotiating table. And we don't know what the consequences will be of Trump's successful diplomacy in the Middle East. I think success breeds success, and maybe it will lead Putin to realize that perhaps a meeting with Trump would be worth his time to consider another way on this conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm really struck by your optimism, Fred. I mean, you tell me that these things are being considered. Obviously, you're not going to tell me the nature of your conversations, but I think you are telling me that your private contacts inside the administration are saying these things are under active consideration.
I'm saying that Trump has made a number of statements at the White House, and after he was asked by reporters, is he considering tough sanctions, he indicated that he would be, but didn't want to talk about it right now.
Now, so look, we've heard President Trump saying a peace deal will not happen until he meets with President Putin. And meanwhile, President Zelensky says Putin, he's no show in Istanbul. He claims it disrespected Trump. We can talk to Fred Fleitz now, who was chief of staff at the United States National Security Council during President Trump's first term. Good afternoon to you, Fred.
Good to be here.
Fred, I had the pleasure of talking when I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago. I'd love to hear your thoughts now on where we are today with Vladimir Putin, a no-show in Istanbul. No great surprise about that, but there seems to be no plan B on the part of President Trump, does there?
Yeah, it was great to see you in Washington. Well, Putin didn't say he was going to show up in Russia. In Turkey. Everyone thought that he might. I do think his behavior suggests that he's not serious about peace and he's disrespecting President Trump. And I think President Trump has had just about enough of this. I think he's leaving the door open a little bit by saying, well, there's not going to be peace until I have a chance to meet with Putin personally. But I think Trump is prepared to drop these negotiations and begin aggressive sanctions with Europe.
I think you were pretty much of that view when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and it's interesting that you hold to that view now. When we heard from President Trump during that Gulf tour, he told journalists on his plane Air Force One, he was busy doing deals in the Gulf. He wasn't concerned with who may be or not be in delegations, which didn't sound encouraging, Fred.
I think Trump is determined to end this war in Ukraine, but his patience is limited. And I'll also add, this is something that my colleague General Kellogg wrote about last year. We wrote a paper on the war in Ukraine that got a lot of attention. Kellogg is one of the special envoys in this effort, that it's possible this war is not solvable, and Trump will do his best to solve it. This is a mess created by Joe Biden, and if we can't solve it, we should try to create conditions where conflicts like this do not break out again, and America does not get caught up in them.
Right. So before that can happen, it's necessary to bring about peace. And I think you're arguing, as many do, that to bring about peace requires more pressure on Russia. So if that is indeed your argument, if that is indeed Plan B, Fred, what should Plan B look like now?
Now, Trump has been clear he's preparing to support aggressive sanctions, but he doesn't want to talk about them because he wants to keep the door open for diplomacy. But I believe the sanctions against Russia will be sanctions against those who buy Russian energy. I think there will be other sanctions on Russian energy, such as interdicting Russian ships and the so-called ghost fleet that is illegally transporting Russian oil. And I think there will be very stiff sanctions on Russian banks and Russian financial assets abroad.
Right. Yeah. So look, here, you get to a fairly sticky question there. If we're talking about, or we end up talking about heavy sanctions being applied on countries that buy Russian energy, we'd be talking about China, wouldn't we? Certainly that's something that Senator Lindsey Graham's been talking about. Would the White House want to see sanctions applied against China in the cause of Ukraine? The White House has been busy cooling the temperature of that trade conflict with China. Does it want to see that go the other way?
I think so. And I think if we put heavy sanctions on Iran, if the nuclear talks fail, China will also be sanctioned if it buys Iranian oil.
Well, that would be a fascinating development. Presumably there would be a cost to that. It would mean just reigniting the trade hostilities between Beijing and Washington.
I think we have to make the case to China that this war in Ukraine is in no one's interest. It's not in China's interest. China could be doing trade deals in Ukraine. It had a good relationship with Ukraine before the war. It already had a presence there, promoting Chinese industry and trade with Ukraine. It would be importing food from Ukraine. So I'm hoping that the Trump administration is also making the case to China that it has a vested interest in ending this outrageous war started by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, the question of trade with China is a very, very big one. Of course, they wouldn't be the only ones drawn into that new phase of sanctions pressure. I mean, in Europe, Spain buys liquid natural gas from Russia too. There'd be a lot of people feeling the pinch, but you suggest now that would be a price worth paying for the greater good.
I believe these are among the tough sanctions being considered to pressure Putin to come to the negotiating table. And we don't know what the consequences will be of Trump's successful diplomacy in the Middle East. I think success breeds success, and maybe it will lead Putin to realize that perhaps a meeting with Trump would be worth his time to consider another way on this conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm really struck by your optimism, Fred. I mean, you tell me that these things are being considered. Obviously, you're not going to tell me the nature of your conversations, but I think you are telling me that your private contacts inside the administration are saying these things are under active consideration.
I'm saying that Trump has made a number of statements at the White House, and after he was asked by reporters, is he considering tough sanctions, he indicated that he would be, but didn't want to talk about it right now.
Okay, then we will watch and wait together. Fred Fleitz, Chief of Staff at the U.S. National Security Council during President Trump's first term. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us again.
Millions of dollars of investment for our country, and we're dealing with really good people that have been abandoned.
Mr. President, are you disappointed in the level of the delegation that the Russians sent to Turkey?
I don't know anything about it.
No,
I'm not disappointed in anything. Who are you from?
BBC News.
I'm not disappointed. What would I be disappointed? We just took in $4 trillion, and he says, are you disappointed about a delegation? I know nothing about a delegation. I haven't even checked. Look, nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying. Thank you. You're going to land right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The level of the threat has increased. We've seen this throughout those 3 years since Russia launched its war of aggression against Ukraine. And we see the threat rising beyond Ukraine. And I want to highlight the importance of what happened in Estonia, where for the first time, Russia responded to economic sanctions by members of the alliance with military action. This is a testament to the level of the threat that we're facing on the eastern flank of NATO. If Russia is tampering with the Estonian Navy 3 days ago, this is precisely because our sanctions are biting. They're biting Russia, because as you remember, what happened in Estonia is that a sanctioned oil tanker was being stopped by the Estonian Navy, and Russian jet fighters came across to basically threaten the Estonian Navy not to stop a sanctioned oil tanker, an oil tanker used by Russia to circumvent those sanctions that we applied on Russian energy. So these sanctions, they are already very strongly affecting the Russian economy. We estimate that our sanctions cost Russia 400 billion euros, which is worth 3 years of military spending by Russia.